They didn't conquer the galaxy with fire. That would have been honest. No, they terrorized it with silence. Whole star systems went dark overnight. No distress calls. No debris. No heroic last stands to immortalize. Just absence. Worlds that had once hummed with life were reduced to cold, empty signals drifting through space like forgotten ghosts. The Carvax Dominion called it compliance. Everyone else called it extinction. They didn't invade. They didn't negotiate. They didn't even announce themselves. One day a civilization existed, loud, flawed, alive. The next, it was gone. Cities intact. Ships docked. Lights still on. But not a single living organism left. No bodies. No blood. Not even bacteria. Just silence. For over a century, the galaxy adapted the only way it knew how, fearfully. Empires folded. Warrior species abandoned their pride. Trade routes bent around Dominion space like rivers avoiding a black hole. Entire cultures rewrote their histories to pretend the Dominion didn't exist. Because how do you fight something that doesn't fight? How do you retaliate against something that leaves no target? How do you prepare for something you can't even understand? You don't. You survive. Quietly. Desperately. Until humanity arrived, and made the worst possible decision. They asked questions. The first human diplomatic envoy lasted exactly 6 minutes. 6 minutes of awkward introductions, cautious optimism, and hopeful curiosity. 6 minutes of humanity trying to do what every new species does: talk before shooting. Then the station went dark. No warning. No weapon signatures. No debris. 600 souls gone. That was humanity's first official contact with the Dominion. And it was their last attempt at diplomacy. 3 weeks later, a message was broadcast across every known channel in the galaxy. Not encrypted. Not filtered. Not polite. "This is Admiral Jonathan Hayes of the United Earth Naval Command." The voice was steady. Calm in a way that made seasoned diplomats uneasy. "We sent you diplomats." A pause. "You sent us silence." Another pause. Longer this time. "We don't respond well to silence." Across the galaxy, listeners leaned in, not because they expected hope, but because they expected stupidity. No one challenged the Dominion. Not directly. Not like this. But Hayes wasn't finished. "You've had your warning," he said. "Now you get our answer." The transmission cut. And for a moment, the galaxy held its breath. Then it exhaled, slowly, nervously. Because everyone knew what came next. Humanity would disappear. Just like the others. Except they didn't. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. Earth didn't go dark. Its colonies didn't vanish. Its fleets didn't disintegrate into silence. Instead, humanity did something deeply unsettling. They started preparing. Not panicking. Not evacuating. Preparing. Shipyards burned day and night. Old war doctrines were dragged out of dusty archives and rewritten with terrifying efficiency. Scientists vanished into classified projects. Entire economies shifted toward one goal: war. But not the kind the galaxy understood. No grand fleets. No alliances. No desperate last stands. Humanity built something else. And then, without fanfare, they sent a single ship. It entered Dominion space alone. No escort. No fleet. No support. Just one vessel, cutting through the silent graveyard of erased civilizations. Observers tracked it from a distance, their sensors trembling with anticipation. They had seen this before. This was how it always began. A brave, or foolish, intruder crosses the line. The Dominion notices. And then, nothing. But the human ship didn't behave like the others. It didn't hesitate. It didn't scan nervously or attempt to hide. It moved with purpose. Confidence. Like it knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. Its designation appeared on long-range sensors. HNS Vengeance. Even the name felt deliberate. Inside the ship, Captain Elias Varn stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the endless dark. "Status," he said quietly. "All systems operational," his executive officer replied. "No contacts." "Of course not." A faint smirk touched Varn's lips. "They're watching." The crew exchanged glances. Every instinct they had screamed that this was wrong. That they were walking into a trap they couldn't even see. But no one spoke it aloud. Because they had all read the same report. 6 minutes. 600 lives. Gone without a trace. Fear had its place. But not here. "Begin broadcast," Varn ordered. "Open channel, wide spectrum." There was a hesitation. "Sir, they've never responded to communication before." Varn didn't look away from the void. "They will today." A beat. "Because today, we're not asking." The signal spread like wildfire through dead space. "This is Captain Elias Varn of the United Earth Naval Command." His voice was calm. Measured. Almost conversational. "You've been busy." No response. Across distant systems, alien observers listened with a mixture of dread and fascination. This was the moment. The moment humanity sealed its fate. "You erase civilizations without warning," Varn continued. "No demands. No negotiation. No explanation." He tilted his head slightly, as if listening for something. "Bad habit." Still nothing. Varn's expression hardened. "Here's the part where we differ," he said. "We don't need to understand you." A pause. "We just need to kill you." The first sign of the Dominion came not as a ship, but as a distortion. Space itself seemed to ripple. Like heat rising from a desert, bending light and reality in subtle, unsettling ways. "Contact," the tactical officer whispered. "Bearing everywhere." More distortions followed. Dozens. Then hundreds. The Dominion had arrived. Silent. Unseen. Unstoppable. Just like always. "Hold position," Varn said. "Sir?" the helmsman asked, barely masking his disbelief. "They're surrounding us." "I know." Varn's voice didn't waver. "That's the point." The crew fell silent. Outside, the distortions intensified, forming a cage of warped space around the Vengeance. The air on the bridge felt heavier, as if reality itself was pressing down on them. This was it. The moment every other species had faced. The moment where everything simply ended. But the Vengeance didn't go dark. It didn't vanish. Instead, it acted. "Execute phase lock," Varn said. The words meant nothing to anyone outside the ship. Inside, they meant everything. "Engaging," the engineer replied, voice tight. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. And then, something impossible happened. The distortion snapped. Not disappeared. Not retreated. Snapped. Like a rubber band pulled too tight and suddenly released. And for the first time, the Dominion was visible. Ships, if they could be called that, flickered into existence. Massive, alien constructs that defied geometry, their forms shifting and unstable, like they didn't belong in this version of reality. The crew stared. The observers watching from distant systems stared. Because for the first time in recorded history, the Dominion had been forced into the light. "Target acquired," the weapons officer said, voice trembling. Varn exhaled slowly. "Fire." The weapon didn't look like much. No massive beam. No dramatic charge-up. Just a pulse. A single, focused burst of energy that struck one of the Dominion vessels dead center. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, the ship unraveled. Not exploded. Not shattered. Unraveled. Its structure collapsing in on itself as if reality had rejected its existence. Layers peeling away into nothingness until there was simply absence. Gone. Destroyed. Silence filled the bridge. Then someone whispered, We killed it." Varn didn't smile. Again, he said. The Dominion reacted instantly. More distortions surged forward, their invisible fleet converging on the lone human ship with overwhelming force. But it was different now. They weren't ghosts anymore. They were targets. And humanity had come prepared. Far beyond the battlefield, deep within the hidden layers of space the Dominion called home. Something ancient shifted. Something vast. Something that had fed on civilizations for longer than stars had burned. It had never been challenged. Never been threatened. Never been hurt. Until now. And for the first time. It noticed humanity. Back on the Vengeance, Captain Varn watched the tactical display light up with incoming contacts. Hundreds. Thousands. An entire nightmare, finally stepping into the light. Good, he said quietly. His crew looked at him. Not with fear. Not anymore. With something else. Understanding. Because they finally realized. This mission had never been about survival. It had been about drawing the enemy out. All of it. Every last piece. Varn straightened, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Let's show them, he said. Why you don't go silent on humanity. The galaxy had spent a century whispering about the Dominion. Humanity answered with a broadcast, and a body count. The moment the first Dominion vessel unraveled, everything changed. They didn't retreat. They didn't hesitate. They adapted. Contacts multiplying, the tactical officer barked. There's shifting, frequency changes across the board. On the main display, reality itself seemed to fracture. New distortions layered over old ones, like predators circling just beneath the surface of dark water. They're learning, the science officer said, voice tight. They're trying to slip back out of phase, avoid the lock. Captain Elias Varn stood still, watching the chaos unfold like a man observing a storm he had already predicted. Of course they are, he murmured. Then, louder. Adjust the anchor. Sir, we just forced them into real space. If we push harder, we might destabilize the entire sector. Varn's expression didn't change. Do it anyway. There was a pause. Then, Aye, Captain. The Vengeance shuddered violently. Power surged through systems never meant to operate this long at peak output. The hull groaned, as if the ship itself understood the risk and didn't approve. Outside, space broke. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Literally. The stars bent. Light stretched. The void twisted into something wrong, something alive with pressure and resistance. And the Dominion screamed. Not in sound, but in reaction. Ships that had begun slipping back into their hidden lair snapped violently into full existence again, their forms flickering erratically like wounded animals caught in a trap. Lock is holding, the engineer shouted. But we're burning out the core. Good, Varn said. Means it's working. The Dominion struck back. Not with weapons. With absence. Entire sections of space around the Vengeance simply ceased to exist for a fraction of a second. Sensors blinked out. Reality flickered like a failing light. Starboard side, gone, the helmsman yelled. It just blinked. Compensate, Varn snapped. I am. There's nothing to compensate against. The ship lurched as gravitational vectors twisted unpredictably. One moment there was space, empty, measurable, understood. The next, there was nothing. And then it was back again. Damage report. Minor hull fractures, but if that keeps happening. It won't, Varn cut in. A beat. Because we're about to make them stop. He turned to the weapons officer. Ready the second solution. The officer hesitated. Sir, we've never tested that outside simulation. Varn's lips curled slightly. Then today's your lucky day. Across the battlefield, the Dominion shifted tactics again. Ships began clustering, not physically, but dimensionally. Their distortions overlapped, stacking layers of unreality in a way that made targeting them nearly impossible. They're shielding themselves, the science officer said. using their own phase variants to scatter our lock. On the display, the once clear targets blurred into chaotic noise. Sir, we're losing them. For the first time, a flicker of tension crossed Varn's face. Not fear. Calculation. Predictive modeling? He asked. Trying, but their movement isn't linear, it's not even. Not in our dimension. Varn finished. A slow grin spread across his face. There you are. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the swirling madness ahead. You're not reacting, he said softly. You're retreating. The crew exchanged glances. Sir? The XO asked. They're not trying to kill us, Varn said. Not yet. A pause. They're trying to understand us. That realization hit harder than any weapon. Because it meant one thing. The Dominion, this unstoppable, ancient terror, wasn't afraid. It was curious. And curiosity, in something that had wiped out civilizations for sport, was far more dangerous than hatred. Captain, the comms officer said suddenly, voice shaking. We're receiving something. Every head snapped toward her. From them? Varn asked. I think so. Put it through. A moment of static. Then, a sound. Low. Layered. Not a voice, not exactly. More like multiple frequencies overlapping in a way the human brain struggled to process. The translator hesitated. Struggled. Then, adapted. Anomaly. The word came through broken, distorted. New pattern. The crew froze. It wasn't much. But it was everything. They're talking, the XO whispered. Varn's gaze hardened. Yeah, he said quietly. They are. The voice, if it could be called that, continued. Inefficient, resistance, unnecessary. A pause. You will cease? The bridge fell silent. Then, someone chuckled. Not nervously. Not in disbelief. Just amused. All eyes turned to Varn. He shook his head slowly, a grin tugging at his lips. Well, he said. You finally speak, and that's what you go with. He stepped closer to the console, leaning in like he was talking to an equal. Let me explain something to you, he said, voice calm but sharp as a blade. You erased 600 of my people in 6 minutes. A beat. No warning. No reason. His eyes darkened. And now you're telling me to cease? The Dominion responded instantly. You are insignificant. Varn's smile widened. There it is, he said softly. Arrogance. Took you long enough. The ship shook violently as another wave of spatial disruptions slammed into them. Consoles sparked. Warning alarms screamed. Hull integrity dropping, someone shouted. Core temperature critical. Captain? Varn didn't move. Didn't flinch. Fire the second solution, he said. This time. The weapon wasn't a pulse. It was a field. An expanding sphere of energy that rippled outward from the Vengeance, distorting space in a way that mirrored the Dominion's own methods, but twisted, aggressive, human. What is that? The XO demanded. Varn didn't answer immediately. He just watched. The field hit the clustered Dominion ships. And everything went wrong. For them. Their carefully layered dimensions collapsed into each other. Ships that had been partially phased overlapped violently, their structures intersecting in impossible ways. For a brief, horrifying moment, they occupied the same space. Then, they tore each other apart. The effect cascaded. One ship collapsing into another into 5 more. A chain reaction of catastrophic failure ripping through their formation like a virus. Direct hits across the board, the tactical officer shouted. They're destroying each other. Varn exhaled slowly. Good, he said. Let them feel it. But the Dominion wasn't done. Far from it. The voice returned, louder now. Clearer. Less curious. More focused. You adapt. A pause. You threaten. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop. "You will be removed." And then, everything stopped. The battlefield froze. Not in motion. In existence. The stars dimmed. The wreckage halted mid-drift. Even the expanding energy field seemed to hang, suspended in a moment that refused to pass. "Sir," the helmsman whispered, "I can't move the ship." Varn's expression tightened. "Neither can they." On the display, the remaining Dominion vessels were perfectly still. Locked. Like insects trapped in amber. But this wasn't their doing. This was something else. Something bigger. Something worse. "Captain," the science officer said, voice barely audible. "There's something else here." Varn didn't ask what. He already knew. From the deepest, darkest layer of space, something was emerging. Not a ship. Not a fleet. Something vast. Something that made the Dominion vessels look like fragments. The thing behind the silence. The thing behind the erasures. The thing that had been watching the entire time. And now, it was looking directly at humanity. The voice came again. But this time, it wasn't fragmented. It wasn't curious. It was aware. "You are not prey." Every system on the Vengeance screamed in protest as the presence pressed against reality itself. Varn stared at the sensor readings, his jaw tightening. "No," he said quietly. "We're not." A pause. Then you are problem. For the first time since entering Dominion space, Captain Elias Varn smiled like a man who had been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Yeah," he said. "We get that a lot." Behind him, alarms blared. The ship was breaking. The battlefield was frozen. And something ancient, something that had devoured civilizations without effort, had finally stepped into the light. Varn took a slow breath. Then gave the order. "Prepare the last protocol." The crew went still. No one spoke. Because everyone knew what that meant. The Vengeance wasn't just a warship. It was bait. A trap. A weapon designed for one purpose. To make the unkillable bleed. And now, they had its attention. The galaxy had always believed the Dominion was the nightmare. They were wrong. The Dominion was just the shadow. This was the thing casting it. It didn't arrive. It revealed itself. Space didn't split or tear, it simply gave up pretending it was empty. The vast presence unfolded like something peeling back a layer of reality no one had known existed. There was no shape the mind could hold on to. Every sensor tried, and failed, to define it. Mass readings contradicted themselves. Energy signatures looped into impossibility. It was there. And yet, it wasn't bound by there. On the bridge of the Vengeance, hardened officers, men and women who had trained for annihilation, felt something ancient crawl up their spines. Not fear. Something older than fear. Recognition. Like prey finally seeing the thing that had always been hunting it. "You interfere," the entity said. Its voice wasn't sound. It was pressure. Thought forced into structure. Meaning imposed without permission. Varn didn't look away. "Yeah," he said. "We tend to do that." Behind him, systems flickered in and out of existence. The ship was struggling to remain real. "Captain," the engineer choked out. "The anchor's failing. We can't hold this layer stable with that thing pushing back." "I know." "Then we need to disengage." "No." Varn's answer came fast. Flat. Final. "We leave now, it goes back to feeding." A beat. "And next time, it won't ignore us." The entity shifted. Not physically. Conceptually. Like a thought changing direction. "You are new," it said. "Unpatterned." A pause. "You do not behave correctly." Varn huffed a quiet laugh. "Yeah, we get that a lot too." The Dominion ships, what remained of them, hung motionless around the battlefield. Frozen, like tools waiting for instruction. "They are efficient," the entity continued. They harvest. They refine. They sustain. Its attention sharpened. You disrupt. Varn tilted his head. Let me translate, he said. You built them. A pause. No. He corrected himself, eyes narrowing as data streamed across his display. Not built, grown. The science officer looked at him, pale. Sir, their structure, it's not mechanical. It's not even fully energy-based. It's biological, Varn finished. Sort of. The realization hit the bridge like a gut punch. The Dominion wasn't an empire. It wasn't even a species. It was a tool. A farming mechanism. Something that culled life, harvested something from it, and fed it back to this thing. Souls? The XO muttered. Energy patterns? The science officer corrected automatically, though her voice trembled. Consciousness imprints, maybe. Neural residue. Doesn't matter what you call it, Varn said quietly. They've been eating the galaxy. The entity didn't deny it. You produce abundance, it said. Variation. Complexity. A pause. Consumption is necessary. Varn's expression hardened. Yeah? He stepped forward slightly, like a man confronting something across a bar instead of across dimensions. Well, here's the problem. His voice dropped. We don't like being on the menu. The entity considered that. Actually, considered it. That was the disturbing part. You are inefficient prey, it said. You resist. You damage the harvest. A longer pause. You are costly. Varn smiled, slow and dangerous. Good. The ship shook violently as reality warped again. The anchor was failing. Fast. Captain? The engineer shouted. We're losing cohesion. Systems are desynchronizing across layers. I see it. Then give the order. Varn didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out at the impossible presence filling the void. At the thing that had erased civilizations like stepping on ants. At the architect of a century of silence. And he made a decision. Open all channels, he said. The XO blinked. Sir? Do it. Moments later, his voice echoed, not just across the battlefield, but across every listening post, every hidden observer, every terrified civilization that had been watching from afar. This is Captain Elias Varn, he said. And if you're hearing this, congratulations, you were right to be afraid. A pause. But you were afraid of the wrong thing. The entity's attention shifted slightly. Curious again. The Dominion? Varn continued. They're not gods. They're not unstoppable. They're livestock dogs. A beat. And we just kicked one. Across the galaxy, listeners leaned in, breathless. Because no one had ever said it out loud before. No one had ever dared. And the thing behind them? Varn went on, voice steady despite the chaos around him. That's your real problem. Another pause. And now it's ours too. The entity pressed harder against reality. Annoyed. You reveal unnecessary information. Varn snorted. What, you prefer the whole mysterious terror angle? The deck lurched. Gravity flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, something exploded. Captain? The XO shouted. Varn raised a hand. Relax. He didn't sound relaxed. But he wasn't panicking either. Because this was the plan. You made one mistake, Varn said, his gaze locked on the entity. You came into our lair. For the first time. The thing hesitated. Just slightly. Just enough. Sir? The science officer whispered, eyes wide as new data flooded in. It's true, it's structure, it's stabilizing. It's having to conform to local physics just to maintain presence. Varn nodded slowly. Exactly. He tapped the console. And that means... The last protocol came online. Deep within the Vengeance, something woke up. Not a weapon. Not a system. Something else. Something the ship had been built around. Power spiked. then spiked again. Then surged past every safety limit ever designed. "Core breach imminent!" the engineer screamed. "Containment failing! Captain, we have seconds!" Varn didn't move. Didn't blink. "Hold it together," he said. "Just a little longer." The entity reacted instantly. "You threaten collapse?" Its presence surged, trying to withdraw. To slip back into its safe, hidden lair. But it couldn't. Not fully. Not anymore. The anchor had done its job. It had dragged the nightmare into the light. And pinned it there. "Too late," Barnes said softly. The crew understood now. All of it. The lone ship. The impossible tech. The willingness to push past failure. This mission had never been about winning a battle. It had been about forcing the enemy. All of it. Into a position where it could be hurt. Even if it meant. "Captain," the Exos said quietly. There was no fear in his voice now. Just acceptance. "Yeah," Barn replied. Around them, the ship began to come apart. Not from enemy fire. From within. The core wasn't just overloading. It was unraveling. Like it was rewriting the rules of its own existence. "What is that?" the science officer whispered. Varn finally smiled. Not cold. Not sharp. But something older. Something deeply, stubbornly human. "It's called a dead man's switch," he said. The entity pushed harder, desperate now. "You will destroy yourselves." Varn met the pressure head on. "Yeah," he said. "We do that sometimes. A beat. But we make it count." The ship began to glow. Not with light. But with wrongness. The same kind the Dominion had used. The same kind the entity lived in. But twisted. Weaponized. Human. "Broadcast this part too," Varn said. The comms officer nodded, tears in her eyes. "Channel open." Varn took a breath. "This is humanity," he said. "And this?" The ship screamed around him. Reality buckled. Time itself seemed to hesitate. "Is us saying no?" The entity realized it then. Too late. Far too late. "You cannot!" "Oh, we can," Varn said. And then, the vengeance ceased to exist. But not quietly. The explosion didn't expand. It collapsed. A point of absolute contradiction forming where the ship had been, where reality itself folded inward, dragging everything with it. The Dominion vessels. The battlefield. And the entity. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, something screamed. And across the galaxy, every sensor lit up. When the light faded, the galaxy blinked. Systems that had gone dark for centuries hummed back to life. Signals returned. Beacons that had been silent for generations lit the void again. Ships in orbit sent frantic messages. Colonies checked in, alive, intact, blinking messages of relief and disbelief. And yet, no one spoke of victory. Because what had happened was too strange, too vast, too human to fit neatly into their understanding. The Dominion? Gone. Not destroyed, unmade. Entire fleets unraveled like threads pulled from a tapestry. What had once been unstoppable predators were now nothing more than scattered particles of improbability. And the entity. The thing that had been feeding on civilizations, patient, ancient, unstoppable, it hadn't been killed either. It had been shown something new. Something that had bent the rules of reality and survival and cruelty to its own stubborn, human will. Across the void, where the vengeance had entered, there was nothing. No debris. No hull fragments. No bodies. Only a faint ripple in space. A ghostly echo of what had been. And yet, somehow, across the galaxy it was felt. A warning. A declaration. Humans had arrived. And everything that had once relied on fear and silence now had reason to worry. On Earth, in the quiet halls of the United Earth Naval Command, Admiral Hayes stood watching long-range scanners that didn't detect the ship. Not because it wasn't there, It simply no longer existed in any dimension known to science. He smiled. Not proudly. Not arrogantly. Not even happily. No, this was something different. This, he said to the room of silent officers, is why they call us unpredictable. An aide swallowed nervously. Sir, it's impossible. One ship, one crew. Hayes cut him off. A thin, humorless smile. Exactly. Far beyond the edges of explored space, alien races convened. Warriors, diplomats, scholars, all watched readings they barely understood. The Karvak's dominion was gone. The void it had left was absolute. And yet, an echo lingered. A single, horrifying truth: humanity didn't need a fleet. They didn't need allies. They didn't even need to win in conventional terms. They only needed one ship. And the galaxy learned a dangerous lesson: you cannot underestimate humans. In the aftermath, survivors whispered stories of how a ship had entered Dominion space, unescorted. Of how an impossible weapon had unfolded across reality. Of how an entire civilization, the apex predator of a century, had been shown the meaning of fear. Some called it luck. Others called it madness. The truth was simpler. It was human. Clever. Relentless. Terrifyingly brilliant. And in their own way, utterly inevitable. Back on Earth, Hayes stared at the star map in his office. The void where the Vengeance had entered shimmered faintly on the screen. Do you think they'll come back? An officer asked. Hayes shrugged. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Maybe. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. He leaned back, fingers steepled. Because if they do, we'll be ready. And if they don't, well, we just reminded the galaxy why humanity doesn't hide. Silence followed. Heavy, reverent, fearful. And somewhere, in the deep, infinite dark between stars, the ancient presence, the thing that had been untouchable for eons, paused. Felt. Understood. And realized, with something approaching calculation, that the galaxy had changed. Forever. In bars across colonies, in whispered conversations between traders, soldiers, and spies, one truth spread like wildfire. Humanity had done the impossible. They had faced the unthinkable. They had stared into the void, and made the void blink. And the galaxy would never forget it. Because humans didn't just survive. They punished. They adapted. They won. And the ones who had once laughed at the idea of resistance, the ones who had terrorized the stars for 100 years, were gone, unmade, erased, unprepared for what came next. The silence they had wielded so well? Now it belonged to humanity. And for once, the galaxy knew true fear. The Vengeance was gone. Its crew, alive only in the echoes of quantum memory, the strands of reality itself, had done their work. But its lesson lingered. A single human ship. One mission. One impossible idea. The galaxy had been warned. Humans were not to be underestimated. Not now. Not ever. And somewhere, deep in the emptiness where the Dominion had ruled, the first ripple of dread spread. Because humanity had arrived. And they had shown how terrifying that could be. The stars themselves seemed to shimmer in response, as if acknowledging the arrival of a species that refused to be caged, controlled, or silenced. Humans. The galaxy had met them. And it would never be the same again.